Welcome to Careers in Accounting. Today we're pleased to welcome Kelly Kennedy. She's the VP at ESCO Technologies. So welcome, Kelly. Thank you for taking time out of your day to visit with us for a little bit. Perhaps we can start with maybe talking about your interest in accounting and how you decided to have that as your interest in college.
Sure. So I would say I chose accounting through the process of elimination, maybe more than any other reason. I had started off in the engineering school as a computer engineering major and quickly figured out that probably was not the right career path for me. From there, I just went down the list of majors and I decided the things I didn't want to do. I didn't want to do anything in the medical or health profession necessarily. My mom and my sister were both teachers. I knew that probably wasn't something I was interested in. I didn't want to do anything that was more vague or nondescript. I wanted something that translated really cleanly to a career after college, something where it'd be fairly easy to find a job. And so that led me to the business school. And then from there, I started to take the introduction to accounting courses, and it just really clicked for me. It seemed logical. It seemed like the right level of kind of analytical and problem-solving skills. A lot of my friends struggled in those courses, but I did really well, and so I thought it would be a good major for me. So I pursued the accounting program. And one nice thing about accounting is that you have the opportunity to really meet a lot of different firms when you're in college, and that recruiting process starts really pretty early. And so from there, I started to learn a little bit more about the big accounting firms and really liked PwC, St. Louis, and sort of chose the office first, I would say. And then the more opportunities were in tax at the time. So I selected tax, and that's how I ended up at PwC Tax.
Excellent. So you're no longer at PwC. So maybe walk us through your thought process and maybe the opportunities that you saw after a few years at PwC and what led you to ESCO.
Sure. So I was at PwC for 10 years and certainly learned a lot during that time, built my skill set, built my client portfolio. But there was a point in time when it made sense from maybe a work-life balance perspective to move on. And ESCO was a client of mine. So I knew the former VP of tax. I knew the tax department members very well. I knew the types of projects that they like to work on. And they had a opportunity open up. So it was very sort of natural for me to move from PwC over to ESCO.
Yeah, you almost get to interview the company for a number of years, see how they work, see their culture, and see if that works for you. So it's kind of nice. You were interviewing, but you already kind of knew what you were getting into.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Exactly. And, the other nice thing when you're in public accounting is that you see a lot of different clients. So you see a lot of different tax departments. So you can also eliminate
process of elimination.
back there. Maybe see a lot of things that you don't want or things that you aren't looking for.
So what do you see the major differences between public accounting and industry?
Yeah, I would say they're numerous. One is the ability to just live and breathe the same facts every day. So when you learn of a factual change or maybe a law change, you kind of instinctively can determine, well, this is going to impact our tax profile in this way. And when you're in client service, you're just a little less connected to those facts. So that's more of a challenge, I would say. You also don't have the budgetary constraints. So if there's something that you want to learn about, you feel free to really dig in and go deeper on some of those issues. I would think that working kind of cross-functionally is sometimes more natural in industry versus in public accounting. Those opportunities exist, but they need to be a little bit more sought out because there is a tendency to be more specialized. Whereas when you're in industry, you get the tax department together and you can talk about different facets, whether that's federal tax or international or state tax and how all those things are really ultimately connected. And then lastly, I would say is the financial reporting aspect is very important when you're working in industry, because not only do you have to put things on a tax return, but then you have to make sure that that gets into the financials correctly and that investors kind of understand how, in my case, how taxes are an element of our overall financial health.
Yeah, and explaining that to management, right?
Right,
And
right.
making sure they understand the nuances of your role.
Exactly. I still say that's one of probably the most challenging aspect of my job is not just to communicate an issue or a problem, but then also the complexity that can arise as a result of that singular issue, whether that be, impact of operating results, regulatory changes, all those types of things, I think can ultimately impact our financial statements.
Yeah, excellent. You want to talk a little bit about a couple projects maybe your group has worked on recently?
Sure. Sure. So last year we had a fairly large acquisition, and it was an Italian company with other international offices. And I did not have any experience working with Italian tax rules, but they're certainly different. There's a lot of bureaucracy involved, so things tend to just work very differently than they do in the U.S. So we've spent a lot of time learning about their requirements, processes, Italian GAAP versus maybe US GAAP. And then, you're also dealing with language barriers and local providers and overcoming all of those sorts of things. So that's certainly taken some time. Beyond that, I would say that we spend a lot of time trying to find ideas that are going to benefit, again, our sort of overall financial health, whether that be tax savings that result in earnings per share or cash tax savings, which can be really important in a rising interest rate environment.
Yeah, excellent. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the challenges you're facing and trying to attract talented people to help you, because you guys got a lot of things going on, and to have that kind of support underneath you to help you do your job. How is that going?
Sure. So we have recently recruited for a couple open positions. Some of those were open really for years. We would, open a new job rec, maybe close it out after a while if we couldn't find anybody, and then start again. And so it's really important whenever you're making hiring decisions to make a good hiring decision, right? And sometimes that takes time. And it feels like even just the pool of candidates is smaller. It feels like that market is shrinking. And sometimes we've had to make some concessions where maybe we wouldn't have done that in the past.
Yep.
So it is a challenge, and we see it at really all levels of recruiting.
And it could be good for young professionals, people coming into the industry as well, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Talented young people are in need.
Yes. And I think, the number one thing I'm always looking for is problem solvers, people that are willing to roll up their sleeves, dig into an issue, understand the complexity of that issue, and then maybe, we eventually work their way towards finding a solution. And so I think if you're interested in doing that, if you're interested in sort of learning throughout that process, the sky's really the limit.
Okay. Well, in terms of compensation then, because that affects all that. So what are you seeing both in your own career and just the progression of salaries and compensation overall for someone in the industry?
Sure. So we don't typically hire directly from campus, but we do hire people with anywhere from 2 to 10 years of experience and beyond. And so I would say the starting salaries coming to industry are definitely higher. And there's definitely more focus on trying to create a comprehensive package, whether that be more flexibility or more vacation time. And then that kind of in conjunction with that higher starting salary is what we're seeing.
And you guys can give equity compensation as well.
Right, at some levels,
for
certainly.
higher levels.
And that's something that I think over time can really dramatically change your overall financial position. So that's important. Our bonuses are subject to multipliers. So when the company does well, you do well individually. All those sorts of things are ways that we try to attract qualified candidates.
Okay. You touched upon work-life flexibility. Can you talk a little bit about how that works for you? I know you have a family, and how do you balance a day
Sure.
between professional and family needs?
Sure. I try to remind people that work-life balance does not always necessarily mean that your life is going to be
Every day.
every single day, right? So it's definitely more of an overtime concept. And I think it's taken me a while, but you have to get comfortable just citing what you have to do that day. And if that means that your family has to come first and you make that clear and you're, either available later on in the day, that all works for most people. So I think my biggest piece of advice would just be very clear in your communications about where you are and how available you are that particular day. But more important to me sometimes than flexibility really is more predictability in my schedule. And I think when you work in a department with good processes in place, good competent people, and you're all communicating, it becomes very easy to have a predictable schedule and therefore easier to sort of manage expectations outside of the workplace as well.
That's was my experience as well. Is the better team you have working for you, you can play off of each other. Where
Yep.
somebody has to be gone at a certain period of time, the other folks can pick up the need. And so
Yes.
it's very helpful to have the solid team working
Yes,
for you.
definitely. And something we try to do within our department is, we talked a little bit about different specialty areas within tax. We always have more of a primary specialty area and then a secondary specialty area. So if somebody's out on medical leave or
That's
something, you have somebody that can kind of step in and cover for them. And that tends to work out very nicely as well.
Excellent. Maybe in final thought here is anything beyond pure technical skills and building and focusing on those things that young professionals should work on to be better in the profession?
Sure. I would say a couple of things come to mind. One is just the importance of relationship building and networking. I think that's something that probably intimidated me a bit early on in my career. And just realizing now that you can always find common ground with people, regardless of maybe your differences in level of experience or something. And you should, pursue relationships with anybody that you kind of come across. I would also say communication is very important, whether that be written or verbal communication. I think just, overall tone of emails and professionalism, all of that's things that you could practice today that are going to suit you well in your career. And the third, I touched on it a bit earlier, is just the building the problem-solving skills, realizing that, things are not always black and white, but kind of breaking it down into smaller pieces and, seeking out help when you need it are all ways that are ultimately going to kind of contribute to your success.
The need for perfect facts, you got to
Right.
get away from that. Perfect law,
Right.
Sometimes that doesn't.
Right.
Neither one of those are there, and business moves on.
Right.
You have to
Right.
function. So
And I would say, being comfortable, not knowing the answer, or even being comfortable being wrong can be important as long as you're willing to sort of acknowledge and confront the mistake is also important.
okay. Well, Kelly, really appreciate you sharing your experiences and some good thoughts. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.